what's amazing about kids, from what I've seen, is they're like 10 out of 10 in emotional fluidity. Like they can go from anger to sadness to joy to disappointment in like 2 minutes.
That's right. They absolutely can.
Yeah. And that's that, most adults are capable of that too, but we've learned to shut it down.
Hi, and welcome back to Raising Men. Today, I'm sitting down with Jonny Miller, founder of Nervous System Mastery and the host of the Inner Frontier podcast. Jonny's work is all about helping high-performing leaders, founders, and creative find calm, resilience, and presence in a world that never slows down. Jonny, welcome to Raising Men.
It's great to be here, Shaun.
I know that I struggle with this. I struggle with remaining present, with staying regulated, especially with the kids. It feels to me like sometimes my nervous system and I are we're enemies, right? And you talk a lot about how our nervous system shapes how we show up in the world and how we can be the mastery of that system as opposed to letting the system be the master of us, right? Mm. When you talk about nervous system mastery, what does that actually mean in everyday terms?
Yeah, well, I like that frame of like feeling like the nervous system is your enemy. And I think, one way to describe it is befriending your nervous system and listening to your nervous system and having a relationship with it, as opposed to feeling like either like you're a victim or that you need to dominate and kind of like whip into submission with too much discipline.
That is the framing that we kind of have in our culture, isn't it? You either are the victim of it and you don't have any control, or you have to have the discipline to beat it into submission. That is
smash
true.
Through it, have grit, grind, hustle, all those different framings. So I think first and foremost, the nervous system is quite literally the lens through which we experience life. And depending on the state of our nervous system, it depends on what we experience. And that impacts the quality of our relationships, the quality of our attention, the quality of our creativity. So for me, it really is upstream of so many other things. And something that I like, or that I find really interesting and useful for myself, is this idea of reducing the half-life of reactivity. So, everyone can probably think of a moment, probably in the last 24 hours, but certainly in the last week, where they did something out of like a reactive, almost like knee-jerk reaction. Maybe they said something, or maybe they just picked up their phone and doom scrolls, whatever that is. And I think practical way of framing nervous system mastery is reducing the half-life of that reactivity. So instead of being in that reactive hijacked state, fight, flight for, 3 hours, sometimes 3 days, sometimes 3 weeks. People spend like weeks or months in this, a state of anger or unprocessed grief or whatever the emotion is. Mm-hmm. And there are very trainable and learnable skills that we can go into that help with reducing that reactivity and then ultimately creating more agency and creating more intentionality. That is really what I care about. The nervous system stuff is interesting, but ultimately what I care about is how can we live in a way that is in line with our highest aspirations and our intentions for who we want to be. And the nervous system skills, I find it's like a high leverage way of achieving that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting frame. I think about it as, we have the two different brains, and one of them is our Conan the Barbarian brain, which we need to be reactive if we're in a fight or those sorts of things. Mm. And the other one is our Sherlock Holmes brain, which is, allows us to apply the more advanced aspects of our brains. And I find that the more time I spend in my Sherlock Holmes brain, the better my results are. Right. Mm. And it's just a better life that I end up having. And my relationships are stronger. And, I get to be, I get to control a lot more of my outcomes if I'm in that state.
Yeah, interesting. I like that frame. And I think there's a risk in that as well. In, I in my 20s, I was in the tech world, and I was, very much prized having a strong intellect, having high IQ, solving problems. Like that was me. I was like a
Same here.
type A problem solver.
Yeah.
And I think one of the risks of that, and of, the Sherlock Holmes approach to life, is that it can be somewhat disembodied. And so if you're, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily true, but
yeah,
I certainly was almost like numb from my neck down. I had very low what's known as interoception, very low somatic awareness. And as a result, I was missing all of the data and feedback that was coming from my body, coming from the signals. And by not paying attention to that, I ran into burnout. When I was working on my startup, I wasn't particularly emotionally attuned. There's a whole host of issues and problems that come from only being in the Sherlock Holmes brain, if that's not also coupled with more embodied intelligence.
Yeah, if you shut the Conan the Barbarian brain off and you're not listening to those signals, then you run the risk of what you're talking about. And I'll tell you, that absolutely resonates with me. I don't think I've mastered that at all. I'm looking forward to talking about the skills you're mentioning. And the fact is that composure and what I think you mean when you talk about nervous system mastery, that is a hallmark of maturity, of success, of leadership, of when we close our eyes and we imagine our best selves, it often has that component, right? You are the master of your outcomes. And so you need that in order to be who you want to be.
Yeah. Well, I think all leadership is ultimately self-leadership.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting, I sometimes work with companies and teams, and the nervous system of an organization is a direct reflection of the nervous system of the leader. Sure. And I imagine that's also probably true for parents too. Like I imagine your nervous system or your kid's nervous system is probably a reflection of your nervous system.
100%. Yeah.
And that will probably change throughout the course of a day or a week or a month.
Yeah. I've always felt that I was so good at remaining in the Sherlock Holmes brain. And in a way, maybe that you're describing as being maladaptive or not quite, disembodied in exactly the way that you're talking about. And when my kids came along, it's like they have a magic button that they can use to just absolutely just get a rise out of me. I would get angrier with my children. I mean, at about just when it was, my boy would be screaming and I wouldn't know how to make him not scream. And it was because he was colicky or he was feeling pain or whatever it was. And it tapped into something in me that a kind of helplessness, a kind of, like I wasn't fit for the world. I wasn't capable. I can't solve this problem. I can't troubleshoot this problem. How am I supposed to do anything at all? And it enraged me. And I'm not used to being angry. I'm not a particularly angry person by nature. And so it was something that I don't have that skill of dealing with that very healthily. And it was really tough for me to deal with. And so I'm interested. Let's get into the skills. So there's really two aspects that I really want to tease apart here. And that is, what do we do in order to practice develop nervous system mastery in ourselves? And how do we cultivate that in our boys also?
Yeah, well, I mean, just sticking with that example that you just shared is something that I believe and I have seen in my own experience, is that it's very difficult for us to be with other people in emotions that we don't feel comfortable feeling and expressing for ourselves. So, I felt this in my life, around grief and certainly around anger, but there is an impulse that a lot of us have to try and like fix other people's emotions. And I think that core impulse comes from a discomfort or a dis-ease with that emotion being brought up in ourselves when someone else is experiencing it. Sure. So I think that is actually a core dynamic that is underlying a lot of the nervous system work. Is essentially I can go into the specific skills, but it comes down to, can we just welcome the full spectrum of our experience as it's arising? Like that's the simplest possible way of saying it. That's basically what it comes down to. But within that, there are kind of specific skills. One of them I mentioned earlier, which is this idea of interoception, which is when let's say that anger is arising, it's like not only having the story of like, oh, this thing just happened, so I'm really angry, but it's like being in touch with there is like a heat in my chest, or there is like my palms are like sweating, or there's like an energy or an electricity in my belly. There's all of these sensations that come along with the experience of anger, and tuning into those, and particularly noticing them when they're like a 2 or 3 out of 10 as opposed to like 11 out of 10.
Yeah. Once it's 11 out of 10, you're done, right?
11 out of 10, I don't know, like full rage blackout. You can fill in the blank. So interoception is really like a lead domino skill. If you don't have that, it's very hard to do anything else. And then the second, let's say, pillar of skills is self-regulation. And I categorize this into top down, bottom up, and outside in. And this is where the agency piece comes online, in that there are very effective practices and protocols which can up or down regulate our nervous system state depending on what is appropriate at the time. So for a lot of people, they'll be, let's say, underdeveloped in the down regulation category. So whether they're feeling anxiety or frustration or anger, it's very helpful to be able to do a breathing practice, do humming, do orienting. There's a number of these different things, and come back into within what's known as your window of tolerance, which is basically where you can be with what is arising without disassociating, without blaming, without reacting, and just be with whoever or whatever's arising. And then the third category is emotional fluidity, which is circling back to the idea of welcoming all of the emotions as they're arising without trying to fix, get rid of, push away, blame, project, etc. So I can go into any one of those, but that's what I describe what I describe as nervous system mastery in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, I love that. Let's drill down into each of those in turn. We'll start with introspection. I'd love to understand. Go ahead.
Interoception, different from introspection.
Okay, say the word again.
Interoception. Interoception, which is the opposite of exteroception, which is like awareness of senses, sounds, sight around us.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. That's a new word to me. So what does that mean? How do I trigger myself to do that rather than what I would naturally do in response to stimulus? Mm-hmm. And how do I cultivate that in my boy?
So what is it? A working definition is basically how aware of your internal landscape are you at any point in time. So it includes like, are you sleepy? Are you hungry? Are you too hot? Are you too cold? Do you need the toilet? But also, what sensations are you noticing? Like what mood is present? Is there an emotional tone? Is there joy? Is there sadness? Etc. Etc. And I find it's helpful to have some kind of like daily practice to just tune in. And you can think of this as like an interoceptive weather report. So it can just take a minute or two, but ideally before you start the day, before all the inbound from life kind of starts streaming in, before the kids are jumping on your bed.
Yeah.
Just tuning in and acknowledging and noticing what is there. And I like to think of tuning into your awareness. Does it feel contracted? Does it feel expansive? Tuning into your posture. Do you feel like straight and upright and present? And then tuning into your emotions or your sensations. Like what is the tone of that is present? And then using that as data to inform, maybe you notice some tiredness. Maybe your kids kept you up for hours and you want to schedule a nap or take a few things off the calendar for that day to recover. Or maybe you have a lot of energy, a lot of creativity, and you want to tap into that. You want to schedule some deep work time to
Yeah.
express that. Or maybe there's some emotion, maybe it's like residual anger or sadness from the day before that you want to set aside a bit of time to just like feel through and process and get to the bottom of, so it doesn't come out in a kinked way to your wife or your kids or whoever it
Right.
is.
Yeah. And then it also seems like that sort of tool is also really helpful. Like if you see your boy start to get dysregulated and he starts to
Mm-hmm.
freak out and get really, really upset. I had a situation this morning where um my boy had gone downstairs and he was making himself some breakfast. And so he's 6. And then the girl went down and she is only 3. So she's unable to pour her own bowl of cereal and pour milk in it. So she was asking the boy for help and he was just ignoring her. And it was very frustrating for her, obviously. And so she came back upstairs into our room and was upset and complaining. And so I went downstairs and I asked the boy to help her with her cereal. And he agreed to do it, but he really didn't want to. And so he was kind of grousing and all of that stuff. And I was rushed. I was kind of in a hurry and I ended up getting pretty upset with him. Like, dude, we help each other in this family and I'm asking you to help me. I'm not asking you to help your sister, even. I'm asking you to help me. Otherwise, I have to go do it. And I'm in a towel. I just got out of the shower. And, I kind of expressed my disappointment at him. But what I didn't do is sit down with him and get him to tap into, why are you feeling so frustrated about just pouring your sister a bowl of cereal here? And that probably would have been a better way to handle that, I suspect.
Yeah, well, I mean, I share my thoughts with the caveat that I don't yet have kids. My wife is
Right.
pregnant. We're super excited to have our first daughter
And pretty soon now, right?
in about 3 months' time. Yeah, so
That's so exciting.
March coming up very soon.
Wow.
But I love what you just said there, and I think that for me, the key is it really is that non-judgmental curiosity. Like that's the key
Yeah.
piece, whether it's for your kid, whether it's for a loved one, or whether it's for yourself. And if it was your own anger and you had a couple of minutes of spaciousness, it's like tuning in and being like, like I'm noticing that I'm angry. Like what is here? What is the sensation? What is underlying this? Like what's the story?
Yeah.
And it's the curiosity without an agenda and without judgment, which is simple, but also really friggin' hard. Especially if you were saying you were in a rush this morning, and that's when this stuff is simple but not easy at all. And especially for kids, I think often kids just want to be seen and validated in their emotional experience, and curiosity is a great way to do that. You can just say like hey, like what's coming up for you? Like, oh, I see that you're kind of angry right now. Like tell me about that. And I think, I mean, what's amazing about kids from what I've seen is they're like 10 out of 10 in emotional fluidity. Like they can go from anger to sadness to joy to disappointment in like 2 minutes.
That's right. They absolutely can.
Yeah. And that's that, most adults are capable of that too, but we've learned to shut it down. We have conditioning and contraction and stories that just get in the way of that. But really we're aspiring to the level of emotional fluidity of young children with some of the higher level meta awareness and skills that come with maturity.
Yeah, there's a tension there, right? If you are really emotionally fluid, but don't have any influence over what emotional state you end up in, that can be really maladaptive, I would think.
Actually, finally, like most people would think that, but I actually don't. I don't think that that's true. As long as this is the key caveat, as long as the emotions aren't being used to subtly manipulate. And what I mean by that is, some people, when they're angry at someone else, and it's basically a way of trying to get what they want, or trying to actually not acknowledge or accept ownership of their anger and blaming someone else for it. that's very different from letting the anger move through you, maybe just like stomping on the ground, be like, oh, like fuck this, like
Yeah.
that, and moving it that way. It moves through very quickly, and then you come back to a place of like grounded calm and centeredness. And this, the same with sadness. Like this is actually more common with, this is somewhat controversial to say, but it's somewhat more common with women who will sometimes use sadness or disappointment to then manipulate the outcome of other people.
Sure.
And it's another way of, and I'm not saying this out of judgment, I'm just saying that it's a protective strategy that we learn,
Yeah.
because it is often uncomfortable to feel those emotions for ourselves and to take full ownership of those emotions for ourselves. And so coming back to parenting, the
Yeah.
more that we're able to learn the skills of fluidly welcoming and expressing our own full spectrum of emotions, the
Uh-huh.
more that kids will model that from us and just like learn that as a default. Because kids,
Yeah.
I'm sure, like from what I've heard, from what I've seen, kids don't really do what we say, but they
No.
do model what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's an important skill to be able to first model the thing and then call attention to it, right? To
Hmm.
anchor
Hmm.
it in their
Exactly.
cognitive brain.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely true that they don't do what we say at all. In fact, they don't even hear you. They just
Yeah.
they just go do.
Yeah.
And you have to demonstrate. Eh,
So just coming back to the interoception piece. So this is something that, again, this is currently theoretical for my wife and I. I'm sure that when it comes to
You'll
actually
learn the
putting this
lesson
into,
practically in 3 to 6 months from now.
yeah. But something that I think we're gonna really attempt to do our best to do is to constantly um be referring our daughter back to her own internal experience. So instead of saying like "good job" or "good girl" or um, praising or rewarding or certainly punishing in any way, but instead being like how did that feel? Like
Yeah.
how was it? How did it feel in your body to do X, Y, or Z?
Uh-huh.
And do you want to do that again? Like did that feel good? And just constantly encouraging that self-referential nature, so that she's not looking to us for praise or blame or reward or whatever, but she's just tuning in to listen to her own interoceptive experience and trusting that. And if something feels good, then it's likely that she'll want to keep doing it more, but not because we say that's good, but because it feels inherently good for
Yeah.
her to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really uh, valuable strategy. It's going to be really tough to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but I think
yeah,
I think that's the game. Right there is the whole game. And you'll be able to do it. I think you'll be able to do it. And um what do you so we talked a little bit about the daily practice of checking in with yourself. And I mean, I guess that exercises the muscle, right?
yeah.
And gets you started on it. First of all, it exercises the muscle of being able to inspect your internal state. But then it also allows you to change the plan for the day to to be more in tune to that.
Mhm,
That's part of the purpose of that daily practice that you were talking about. What
mhm,
about during the day and throughout the day when you're in the thick of it? You're in the weeds. You're traipsing through the jungle. What are some ways that you can start to notice the state of your own nervous system throughout the day?
mm. Yeah. Um, Again, this can be challenging, especially for folks that have full busy schedules, full
Yeah.
calendars. Um, I like to try and have little check-in points in transition moments during the day. So whether that's between, let's say, like morning work shift and lunch, have a little kind of 5-10 minute pause. If I have time, I love the practice of yoga nidra or NSDR, which is a kind of 15 to 30 minutes like guided body scan that feels like a power nap on steroids is probably the best
Yeah.
way to put it. And it's actually really helpful for cultivating interoception as well, because when you're scanning different points around your body, you're actually bringing more high definition awareness to those different parts of your body. And I liken this to like a chef going to culinary school, and you kind of develop your flavor palette. You also develop your kind of internal palette of the
Yeah.
more kind of subtle, high definition sensations that you might otherwise miss. So I think I'm a huge fan of NSDR and non-sleep deep rest if time is available.
Yeah.
And it's amazing if you didn't get much sleep. I've seen studies that it's the equivalent of about 2 hours sleep from a 30-minute practice. So it's very
Really?
high, yeah, like high ROI in that sense.
I
Many
mean,
people do it like first thing when they wake up in the morning or after lunch, which
yeah.
is in line with your circadian rhythm. So that's
Yeah.
super practical and
I mean,
easy to do.
that can gain you time. I mean, if that's
It
really
does.
how it works,
Get any time.
then
Yep.
that you're taking 30 minutes to get way more
Yep.
than that on the back end of that.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where do I learn more about NSDR?
Andrew Huberman actually coined the term.
Okay.
It's his version of Yoga Nidra, and Yoga Nidra has more, let's say, like mystical and spiritual language
Sure.
thrown in. So he just wanted to kind of like extract the practice itself without the additional like intention setting and mystical pieces. I've recorded some. If you just Google Jonny Miller NSDR or YouTube, there's a couple on there. We also have an app called State Shift where there's some recordings on there as well. And there's also a lady that I listen to. Her name is Ali Boothroyd, and she has a bunch of great ones on YouTube. ALLY Boothroyd, and she's great. She has like a nice relaxing voice too. She's probably better voice than I do. So
I love that. Thank you for those pointers. That's tremendous. I'm going to give that a shot. And I mean, I've always been so resistant to that sort of thing, and I'm opening up to it now.
It's much easier than meditation because
Yeah.
you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You just lie there and listen, and there's just a very slight trace of awareness that you're moving your awareness through different parts of your body, and the feeling that you get afterwards, it's like a second wind. It's like, I don't know, I love it. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's such a good practice.
Yeah. I've done yoga a handful of times in my life, and I just did it again this past Saturday. And I went with my wife, and we did a yoga class together, and I felt that at the end of that, and it's funny. I mean, I absolutely felt invigorated, and I absolutely felt so much more energy than I went in with. And that's not normally how I feel after kind of a workout session. And I really, really clocked that. I was like, man, I need to be thinking about this sort of thing a lot more.
Yeah, nice. So that kind of ties into the in the self-regulation strategies that I mentioned, top down, bottom up, and outside in.
Right.
So top down are things like cognitive reframes, maybe mindfulness practice, maybe affirmations, where you're like using your mind to change the state of your body or your nervous system.
Yeah.
And then the bottom up ones are things like yoga practice, things like breathing exercises, humming, where you're basically leveraging your physiology to activate the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system, which activates the relaxation. And then from there, you generally have calmer thoughts and a more relaxed mind because your body is more relaxed.
Okay, so top down means use your mind to try to influence the state of your body. And then bottom up is use your body to influence the state of your mind.
Precisely. And there's actually a little neuroscience nugget. There are 4 times more efferent neurons, which are neurons going from your body to your brain, than from your brain to your body. So it's like a super highway of data going up and like one single lane of traffic going down.
Okay.
And I kind of take that to imply that there's just more leverage to be had from influencing the body than
the bottom up. And then so what's outside in?
Outside in is changing your environment or changing the people around you. So obvious example is like, think of the difference you feel between standing on the edge of a cliff with a broad horizon at a sunset versus New York City downtown subway. Like they're going to result in two very different nervous system states. And you can, I like this phrase of, we design our environments and our environments design us in return. So to
Yeah,
the
they're
extent that
pragmatic.
you're able to influence your environment, your surrounding,
Yeah,
a very low hanging fruit is like changing the lighting, using incandescent bulbs that are more skewed towards the red light end of the spectrum, as opposed to typical LEDs, which have a lot of blue light
yeah,
and a lot of flicker as well. And the flicker and the blue light, especially after sunset, are really bad for inhibiting the melatonin release, impacts sleep, and you know they just don't feel good to be around. Like if you're in a supermarket or a hospital with terrible overhead lighting,
I know
it's
exactly. It's like it sucks the energy out of your eyeballs.
yes, exactly. So lighting is a very, and you know, you just change the light bulb in your house once and like it's done. Like
Yeah,
that's like a very easy fix. But and then you know also a huge category is co-regulation, which is you know what your kids are going to be coming to you for many times a day, because when kids are young, they don't yet have the wiring to self-regulate. They require a caregiver to help them to regulate.
yeah,
And so, but as adults, it's the same as well. Like when we're outside of our window of tolerance, when we're you know, at the edge of our capacity, having someone else who is grounded, just their presence, or even better, like a hug or some touch, is incredibly effective at downshifting us and just helping us to feel safe again. Because we're wired to be social creatures. We're not wired to be like independent lone wolves.
right.
And that is, you know, if you're lucky enough to have someone around you that has a grounded nervous system and they have a few minutes of time, that's probably the best nervous system hack you can find.
Is is connecting with somebody else who's it's
Yeah,
yeah. It's almost like
connection.
yeah. I think I like that metaphor that you're kind of touching upon there, where it's like there's it's an electrical circuit, and
Mm,
you're getting wound up. You've got all this electrical charge in you,
mm-hmm,
and you need to discharge it somehow.
mm-hmm,
And there are healthy ways to discharge it, and there are unhealthy ways to discharge it. And one of the healthy ways to discharge it is to find somebody who's grounded and
mm-hmm,
complete the circuit with them. I mean,
mm,
even physically, you're saying like hug it out,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And there's you know there's a few other ways I can extend that metaphor. One is that um, when our vasculature, when our bodies are clenched,
yeah,
that adds constriction to the circuitry. And so you know anxiety, the word literally comes from the Latin ango, which means to constrict. And anxiety is actually, in my opinion, not an emotion, but it's a resistance to an underlying emotional experience. And
yeah,
so when a lot of people say they have anxiety, it's because consciously or unconsciously, they are constricting against an underlying emotional experience. And if you're able to release that clenching in the body, and a really practical way that people can think of what this means is if you imagine turning on your shower to cold, and the moment before you step into the cold shower, think about what your body does. Like you're like clench, like
yeah,
bracing against it. That's
yeah.
exactly the same motion that we do when emotions arise that don't feel safe. And so the degree to which we can relax and open up and breathe into and just like it's like take an exhale,
Yeah.
that allows that energy in the system to flow more fluidly.
I feel like I was trained to do the opposite of that as a child.
Mm,
Like I feel like all of the models of masculinity, the Marlboro Man, you know, Clint Eastwood,
mm,
you know, all of the models I had available to me, all of the feedback that I got from my culture that I grew up in,
mm,
all taught me to suppress my emotions or just, you know, shoulder to the grindstone, persevere, push through the stress.
mm,
And you know, that's one way to do it, right? One way to you know, get rid of the electrical energy is to put it in a capacitor somewhere in your circuit where, you know, it stays in the system, but it's not active it anymore, right?
mhm,
It's not circulating. It will
mm,
at some
mm,
point,
mhm,
I'm
mhm,
sure,
mhm,
but it's not doing it right now, and it's just like
mhm.
pushing it down.
Yep.
But what you're describing is is developing the skill and developing the habit of discharging that naturally or
Yeah.
healthily.
And, just to, again, build on that, I think of that move of repressing or storing for later as building emotional debt. And
Yeah.
it's actually a very useful skill in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely.
In
I
many
mean,
cases, very,
yeah,
very helpful. If you're in a boredom situation, or if like shit hits the fan and you need to act, then yeah, like that's great.
yeah,
If you're a Navy SEAL or a Marine, that's a very helpful skill.
yeah,
But in the same way that, when Navy SEALs come back from deployment, many of them have PTSD
sure.
because they haven't found a way to metabolize that emotional debt that has been stored from the
Right.
time that they've been pushing it away.
You've worked with a lot of really high achieving men, and I'm so interested in touching into that, like what shifts when they start to put this into practice, and they're starting to actually feel the emotion and starting to feel that and check in with their bodies instead of just trying to fix it or suppress it.
Mm, what shifts? Well, I mean, to be honest, I meet a lot of these folks, not always, but sometimes when they're in the midst of or just following some kind of crisis,
Yeah.
like some kind of either existential crisis. Maybe they're a founder and they've sold their company and they've got 8 figures in the bank account, but they still feel empty and hollow and dead inside.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just hit burnout and they're going through a health crisis, or maybe they just broke up with their wife, all these things.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, it often does take some kind of crisis,
Yeah.
tragic event to wake us up, to humble us, sometimes humiliate us to the point where we realize that the current mental models that we have aren't serving us, or they're
Yeah.
not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, it very much depends on the person and the case, but I think most of these folks, they've been rewarded for pushing, for grinding, for
That's
hustling.
absolutely right.
And
Yeah.
society rewards that in the short
That's right.
term in a lot of cases. Like
Yeah.
you get money, status, fame from that. And there's
Yeah, your
many folks.
ability to do that is how you feel like you got to where you are.
Yeah, not all of them, but a lot of folks, I think, do get that. But it's often at the detriment of their relationships to others, their relationship to their self, a vicious inner critic. A lot of them have as well.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
Diminishing circle of genuine friendships. The things that actually, in my opinion, contribute to a life well lived and a meaningful life. They might have the kind of external scoreboard taken care of, but in terms of like their inner experience of life, there's a lot to be gained. So,
Yeah.
um, it really depends on. I try and meet people with where they're at.
Yeah.
But what I notice is that over time, and this stuff does take time. Like there's really not like a kind of week-long quick fix. But once their adrenals have kind of come back online, if they've gone through burnout, once they've got a bit more resource and capacity and a little bit of spaciousness, then really, I think it's the emotional work that has the biggest ROI, like the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah.
Because once you stop orienting your life to habitually avoid feeling certain emotions, it creates so much more freedom, so much more agency, and actually so much more joy. There's one of our guest speakers in Nervous System Mastery, Joe Hudson, has this phrase. He says, "Joy is the matriarch of a family of emotions, and she won't come into a house where her children aren't welcome." And
Wow.
you can apply that to parenting, but
Yeah.
it's really very true that joy is very hard to touch into, especially sustained joy
Yeah.
or deep levels of joy when there is repressed anger, unprocessed grief, uh, et cetera, et cetera. And so, um, going into the deeper somatic work, I work with breath work in person with clients, but there's also practices like Hakomi, somatic experiencing. Some people use MDMA assisted therapy, ketamine assisted therapy. I'm a big fan of those to the degree that there aren't contraindications. But really, for me, it's the deeper emotional excavation that creates the lasting freedom in people, and that combined with shifting to habits that include, non-sleep deep rests a few times a week, breath work, and really a lot of what underlies this, I think, is a sense of uh, courageous curiosity, which is like the willingness to be curious about the shit that you've spent the last 20 years running from.
Yeah.
And that's really the fundamental thing, is like going from achieving, pushing, grinding to run away from that stuff
Yeah.
to doing a 180 turn and moving towards it and courageously embracing it.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And it makes me think of, so it's like what you described with the NSDR, where you feel like you don't have the time to do it. But
Mhm.
then when you do it, it gives you more
Gives you
time,
time.
gives you more
Yeah,
bandwidth,
totally.
right?
Totally.
And Stephen Covey had a great metaphor for that. He said it's like you're too busy driving to pull over for gas,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Or,
that's what
or
this makes me think of.
I've heard, I think that maybe the Dalai Lama, someone has said, like, if you don't have 3 minutes to meditate, you need 3 hours, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I totally get it, and and I'm definitely one of those people that doesn't necessarily have 3 minutes to meditate. It's given me something serious to think about. Now, let me ask you. So, if someone right now is listening and they're caught in that cycle, they're in that situation where they don't have 3 minutes to meditate, right?
Mhm.
And they're just absolutely caught in stress. What is one thing they can do? One practice they can do right now in real time to get themselves regulated or get themselves back on track or start on the process?
Mm. Yeah. Um, in real time, I'm a big fan of a practice called expanding awareness, which comes from this guy who created the Alexander technique, and very simple, is just noticing the space above you, behind you, to the sides of you, and below you.
Mm.
And there's almost a one-to-one relationship between how expanded our awareness is versus how stressed we are. Like when we get stressed, it's like we experience life through a straw. It's almost like we
Yeah,
get that
yeah,
tunnel
you get tunnel
vision,
vision.
blinkers
Absolutely.
on, and so it's actually a bi-directional relationship where
Yeah.
I'm kind of doing it right now. Like you just remember that you have space behind you, space below you, and then from that, often I'll notice a sigh. The physiological sigh is, one that's been popularized by Huberman, and that's also very effective.
Yeah.
Um, but just re-inhabiting the body, also feeling your feet on the ground, feeling your hands, coming back into the senses, like coming back into, there's a practice called orienting. So naming 3 things you can see,
Mm.
2 things you can hear, and 1 thing you can feel,
Okay.
and just doing that. And that will bring you back into the present. It'll
Yeah.
just like bring you out of whatever loop or mental kind of thought pattern you're in.
Yeah.
And that's a way to almost like return to center. And then, once you have a bit of centeredness, let's, use the example of someone that has a crazy busy calendar. Um, Honestly, the practice of setting boundaries
Mhm.
is very important, and saying no to things that aren't completely essential.
Yeah.
Because people that have, the most successful founders and execs typically have close to empty calendars. Like they might have 500-person companies, but
Yeah.
they'll have like 2 recurring meetings like, in their week. And um, yeah, so there's but that requires fairly fierce protection of time, and often it takes having morning practices in the beginning, whether it's breath work or meditation or whatever people are drawn to then make decisions from that place of spaciousness, which then typically are self-reinforcing, and you get more spaciousness over time, as
Yeah.
opposed to just like filling your calendar with more and more and more and more.
Yeah. That is such a tremendously powerful statement right there. Is the most high achieving people have very, very light calendars. And because they have leveraged. I mean, they've used all the leverage they have
Mhm.
to go out there and create the value there, and they have boundaries, really,
Mhm.
really strictly enforced boundaries
Mhm.
to enforce that.
And they have the spaciousness so that when the right opportunity comes by, they
Yeah.
can go all in. They can put 110% of their energy towards that thing. I think of it, it's like, I mean, I went surfing this morning, and great surfers will sit out back, like waiting for the waves to come, but be in the perfect position. So
Uh-huh.
when that set comes, they're just like right there and they can paddle in and
Yeah.
catch that wave. As opposed to folks who are like in the whitewash just getting pounded by
Yeah, and
like wave after wave
exerting
after
all of
wave.
their energy. That
Yeah.
is the perfect metaphor for that concept. You know, I was listening to a podcast over the weekend, and somebody was talking about how our modern world, with all of the available stimuli, we've got our computers and we have our devices and we have all the noise of the world and the TV and the radio and all of these things. There is just a tremendous amount of stimulus that is all over the place, and we're not naturally predisposed to be able to handle that properly.
Hmm.
And it keeps us from being able to think. We're too busy. We're reading, or we're listening to podcasts, or we're watching YouTube, or we're doing all these things. We're processing our email. We're doing all of these things. There's all this
Hmm.
activity, but none of the thinking and the introspection and the true creativity.
Mm.
And we're in a pending crisis here because we've got AI coming online that it has no creativity, but it can do a lot of the activity, or it will be able to do a lot of the activity that humans do today that we think is creating value, but it's actually not, or it's not going to be in 6 months or a year or 2 years. And we're losing the ability because of the screens and because of our modern world. We're losing the ability to do that thing that is uniquely human,
Mm.
and we need to recapture it. And I think that this nervous system mastery concept, exactly what you're talking about, that's one of the ways we can recapture it, isn't it?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. And, you know, if I think about the social media and like content landscape and
Yeah.
what AI is already doing to that, especially on TikTok, where
Right.
the majority of videos are already AI generated.
Yeah.
And the algorithms are going to be so tailored to the precise ways that they can hook you in. And
Right.
often the way they hook you in is through emotions that you haven't welcomed in yourself. So like rage bait is a great way of getting clicks on Twitter
So
and
good. Yeah.
TikTok these days, because people don't have a healthy relationship with anger. So they click on everything that makes them angry.
Right.
Um, but I agree with you. I think that, you know, that episode was titled, I think, Defense Against the Dark Arts of Distraction.
Uh,
And it is going to be so, so, so hard to maintain a sustained sense of nervous system regulation in that kind of environment.
yeah.
And they're already incredibly good at pulling us out of presence
Yeah.
and pulling us, you know, so I think the average number of phone pickups is something like 150 a day for like most adults, and even higher for kids. And kids spend 3 to 4 hours a day looking at screens, looking at their phones.
Wow.
Um, and you can just feel what it does to you. Like I certainly can. Like I know
Into.
if I spend even 30 minutes or 10 minutes looking at like a social media feed, the way that I feel, it's like I lose some of that internal presence. And speaking of masculinity, I lose some of that, like my capacity for attention.
Yeah.
And so I do think that these practices and also setting very clear boundaries with yourself around notifications, around screen time, around what apps you even have on your phone, I think will be increasingly important, combined with increased, actually, like interoception. Because
Mhm.
if you can tune in and notice that actually after scrolling for 20 minutes, you feel a bit shit inside,
Yeah.
then you make a decision from that place of like, oh, actually, like, I don't want to be doing that every evening instead of connecting with my kids or connecting with my loved one or whatever it is. And so
Yeah.
you make different, hopefully more aligned decisions
Yeah.
from that place once you've listened to that internal feedback. Um,
Yeah. I've never been a smoker. but I had a really close friend who was, and I ended up reading a book about quitting smoking.
Mm.
And the quitting smoking, I guess, is one of the most, and I can imagine, I feel this, one of the most difficult things you can ever do. But the key to it, and most of the people I've ever known who have successfully quit smoking said something along the lines of this. At some point, it just clicked with me, and I never needed to smoke anymore. And it was tough. I had some physical withdrawal for some period of time, but after that,
Mhm.
after the mental thing was over, it was done. And the mental thing is realizing that it's the cigarette that makes you feel shitty. You think the connection you have is that the cigarette is the solution to the feeling of shittiness, but it's
Mhm.
not. It's the cause of the shittiness. It's just
Mhm.
delayed. And once you make that connection, you no longer feel the need to have the cigarette. And I think there's a similar thing going on with picking up Facebook or strolling
Mhm.
through social media. And we're going to have to break that cycle if we want to get out of it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's I don't know, man. Like it's going to be increasingly hard with the way that AI is going,
Yeah.
and just the incentives that these enormous multi-million-dollar companies have to
They make a
mine and
lot of money.
extract the resource of our attention.
Yeah.
Like that's literally what they're designed to do. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I do think that these
Yeah.
some especially for kids. I mean, like I'm really somewhat, I don't want to say fearful, but just I'm just not optimistic about
Yeah.
the amount of screen time that the average kid has these days.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's going to lead to good
But
things.
the hopeful message there and is that your biggest problem, a big problem is also a big opportunity. And the
Hmm.
big opportunity here is being able to retain your presentness through that distraction
Mm,
and
mm,
not get distracted and all that. That's a superpower.
mm.
And
Yeah,
that is going to turn
yeah,
you into Superman compared to the folks who can't do that.
yeah, yeah. I agree. And making decisions from that grounded, regulated,
Yeah.
intentional place.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, just think what a superpower that is. You're able to do that where the rest of the world cannot.
hmm hmm Yeah,
That's
and that also gives you the ability to make great decisions
yeah.
and to think clearly and to be creative and to build deep relationships. Like
Yeah.
those are going to be the only skills really, or a handful of the few skills that will be valuable in an
Right.
age where
In an AI era.
content creation and even product generation, the costs go to zero with AI
Yeah.
and robotics. Um,
Yeah.
really, the most valuable thing will be our capacity for attention, presence, and from there, decision making and building deep relationships.
Yeah. And so what a gift we can give to our sons if we can
Yeah,
make
yeah,
that easy for them.
totally,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Well, I always like to finish up these conversations with the same question. And that is, what is one principle that you'd like to leave our listeners with? Something that they can
Oh,
explore or incorporate into their lives.
I love that. I will just on a meta note, I really like the idea of developing intentional operating principles for life.
Yeah.
And I
Me
think
too.
going through and experimenting with them
Yeah.
is such a high value activity. Okay, so if I was going to give one operating principle to experiment with, let's see. Um, the thing that's coming up is explore welcoming your emotions. See what happens. Like welcome, maybe to put that more concretely,
Yeah.
embracing intensity,
Yeah.
embracing emotional intensity,
Embrace
and
emotional intensity.
and
That is a
moving
really, really, really powerful principle. And I
move
think,
towards it
and
instead of run away from it.
culturally, that is the opposite of what, and also, allow your children to do that. Give them the space to do it
Hmm.
too. I mean,
Hmm.
one of the things that happens often is the kids will start dysregulating, and your instinct is to get in their face, calm down, basically yell in their face and you scream at them to calm down. Of course,
how does that work?
it doesn't work at all. But
yeah,
because the problem is that you yourself are becoming dysregulated.
Yeah.
But think about if you're able to welcome the intensity, the emotional intensity, and welcome their emotional intensity too, so it doesn't dysregulate you. And they recognize, I see, when I can behave this way and it doesn't have to blow up into this thing.
Yeah.
And I don't have to blow up into this thing either. That's really, really a powerful principle.
One of my friends, he's a dad, and he has this. They like do anger together. So when his kid's angry, they're like, yeah, let's get angry together. They like stomp around on the floor and just like, rah, rah, rah. And like kids love it. It's like a space where anger is like welcome and like great. Like it's a great practice to have, and it's connecting and it's fun.
Yeah. I remember this time when the boy was, he was 3 weeks older. He was a little older than that, but young. I mean, very, very less than 2 or 3 months. And he was having colic. And I was driving him around. I lived in Chicago, and we were driving around at 2:00 in the morning in the snow, and he was just screaming, and he'd been screaming for an hour and a half. And there's nothing I could do to give him comfort. And I just started screaming with him. I wasn't screaming at him, but I just started screaming with him. Yeah. And we were both just screaming together in the car at 2:00 in the morning. And it really helped. I think it helped both of us.
Great. Yeah.
And eventually, pretty soon he fell asleep.
I love that. That's so good.
Well, Jonny, this has been just an absolutely delightful and powerful conversation. I really appreciate it. If you want to go deeper into Jonny's work, check out Nervous System Mastery at nsmastery.com and his podcast, The Inner Frontier, for more conversations on resilience and embodied leadership. And the links are in the show notes. Jonny, let's keep doing the inner work that helps us raise strong, grounded, and emotionally aware men. And thank you for all of the work that you do.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shaun. This was super fun. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to Raising Men. I'm Shaun Dawson, and you're a great parent. Raising Men is produced by Phil Hernandez. This episode was edited by Ralph Tolentino.